Welcome back to another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Richard Thompson. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Kellie Pritchard-Peschek, thought leader in all things burnout, resilience, and high performance. Together, we explore what it really means to thrive as leaders without sacrificing our health, happiness, or humanity. From Olympic sport to corporate boardrooms, Kellie shares her powerful story of burnout and recovery and how redefining performance can help us sustain success over a lifetime. Whether you're leading teams or chasing personal goals, today's conversation is one you don't want to miss. All right, let's get into it. Dr. Kellie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Richard.
I've been excited to interview you because I see you as a thought leader in this whole sort of arena of burnout and high performance, certainly in the corporate setting. Let's kick things off. Why do you think burnout is, or the, I guess, the pursuit of having it all or working excessively hard for an extended period of time, why do you think that's worn like a badge of honor for some leaders?
It's a great question, and I think it is multifaceted. So when we're in that state of being a high performer, that is our identity, and there's a lot that comes along with that. When we want to achieve, we're striving, we're ambitious, it comes part and parcel with that high performance drive, and I think it's internal drive. And then that is combined with the environments that we're working in, that these high performing environments, they really demand a lot from us. So it's sort of this catalyst of the internally driven identity and mindset of being this high performer that I feel really sort of catalyzes in these environments that really expect that, in some cases down the other end of the spectrum, maybe exploit that as well. And this is where we start to get into the troublesome zones where, high performance stops being something that we can do healthily and starts to be unhealthy for us as individuals and also for leaders and ultimately organizations that they're in.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into this because I think as high performers, the general position is it must be hard. Like it is hard work. It is not easy. We take on almost like Parkinson's law where you're like, well, I can manage this. And the most challenging feeling is having everything under control almost. That becomes not a normal feeling if everything's smooth sailing and manageable because you almost then go, well, I've got some capacity to get some more on. Like I'm a firm believer of that if it's meaningful for you, you'll find time for it. Whenever someone says, I don't have time for the gym, well, it's just a lack of priority for the gym. You can manage it. Everything is possible. And I guess that's the tipping point of going, when does that house of cards, when do you pull that card away and everything falls out? And for all the high performers out there, and I might be speaking from a sample size of one, but you sort of think, well, that's not going to be me. I've got this, I've got 1,000 balls in the air, but I'm managing it and I'm quite enjoying the juggle, right? Until you are that person. And this is for you from your experience, right? So talk to me about your lived experience through this because you were a supreme juggler until you weren't.
Exactly. And I've used exactly the same metaphors and analogies when reflecting on my own experience. We build a house of cards and it's from an unstable foundation and it's this internal drive as that high performer identity. And everything that you've just touched on, it needs to be hard. I need to be doing it all. I need to almost struggle in a sense to feel like I'm a true high performer. I was definitely in that state. I was juggling all of those balls and
give me some balls you're juggling.
working in an environment. So I had just moved overseas and into a role that was larger than what was on the label. So there was sort of that unexpectedness of it, and just the multifaceted elements. It was probably 3 or 4 roles wrapped up in one. And so I was, in practice, I was the sports scientist for a national training centre and junior and senior national teams for a particular sport. I was building and operating a satellite high-performance centre for other resident federations of sport. And I was also building and running a network of sports science and sports medicine practitioners, alongside the daily maintenance of operating that, just the technicalities of a business, running a lab, like all of those things, doing the data entry, like doing all of the do. And it was incredible. I look back now and there would be no way that I could go back in and pick up that load and do it again. And it's just phenomenal the way that we can push ourselves, the way that we can take on more, and we adapt to that. It was abnormal saying it now, but it was normal to me at the time. It was ticking all of the boxes as a high performer. I felt like I was achieving. I felt like I was contributing. But these balls, they stayed in the air only because I pushed myself so hard and sacrificed so much of myself in order to do that. And a lot of other things got wiped off the table, personal life, my own health and well-being, all in pursuit of this. And I think that's when it can become detrimental.
Yeah, I think you touched on a great point there, where in the moment you think it is fine, and it is the amount of load that you are carrying. What would be if the version of you from 5 years ago could see where you ended up now? What do you think she would say?
I don't think she would have believed it was possible, for many aspects. 1, the career shift, and 2, the way that I have now shifted my own mindset around what it means to be a high performer and what it truly takes to be a high performer. And the joy and the ease that I have in my life now, really living into that passion and purpose. And I don't think that was even in my mindset back then. Just didn't have that capacity to even think about how different life could be. And if I was to reverse that and look back 5 years, I would challenge whether I was a high performer or whether I was just high functioning.
So important, so interesting. So with that experience, then what is your take on high performance now?
High performance now is a lot more, I guess, expanded in a way. I think high performance back then for me was a hard-driving, single-minded, narrow focus on achievement, ambition, drive, climbing that ladder in a very high-performing environment. I mean, it was Olympic sport, so you don't get much pressured and high performance than that. Now it is more expanded in the space that my own well-being has to come into that. I cannot be a high performer if I am not taking care of myself, if I don't have the energy, the physical capacity, the mental acuity to be doing and delivering on what I need to be. As a high performer, we're typically in environments that do have responsibility and pressure, and we need to deliver. So delivering means something different now.
I wonder whether it's the horizon view because and certainly from my background in sport, and similarly by the sounds of it in the federation's life of the Olympic, of the Olympiad sort of cycle, it becomes very much of a finite game where you're like, okay, well, this is the date that we need to succeed by, and this is what success and failure are measured. And so it is, as you said, it is extraordinary how much a human can take on, knowing that there is a finish line, knowing that there is a date that we are working towards. And then you recover, I guess, for a little bit once you've achieved that or otherwise. But by the sounds of it, what you're saying, which I absolutely love, and I haven't really thought too hard about it, because I feel personally that I'm still in that, even now in business, I'm still in what the next goal is mindset. Whereas I think what you touched on is really profound. I think the idea of supreme high performance, let's call it, is this forever position. That how can we achieve huge success, but consistently over an infinite period of time, or over your lifetime, not over the next 6 months, 12 months. And that becomes, firstly, obviously looking after yourself becomes priority one. Because without that, you break down. But if we could view all decisions, if we could view the way that we show up, the way we act, the way we interact, what we consume, how we act, like go about everything on a view of, is this consistent? Is this able to be consistent and replicable for my entire life?
Absolutely.
That's a mind shift.
It really is. And I think Olympic sport is a great analogy because it's 4 years. Every 4 years, there is a date in time for 2 weeks where, the best athletes in the world come together and you must perform on that specific date, regardless of what is going on. And it's a very narrow-minded focus. It's 4 years and it's engineered and structured to that date. And I think the peaks and troughs are a lot higher amplitude. So you go really hard, but then, there is quite a downtime, and it is really this cyclical nature. Whereas if we compare that to being a high performer in corporate life or running a business, we don't have a 4-year cycle or an 8-year lifespan like an athlete does at that level. We're in this for 40 or 50 years, right? So we can't do that same level of extremity. So how do we keep this sustainable without compromising on the performance aspect? I completely agree we need to be high performers, but high performance looks different and it has to. And this is where I love working about how do we embed this into life that is doable, sustainable, actionable, that it doesn't have these peaks or troughs, and that it's health and well-being are embedded into your lifestyle. It's who you are, not what you're doing now. And when we can get to that point, we have a much better chance to perform. And I'm similar to you now, running my own business. So I've really had to rethink my whole mindset and approach to what this actually looks like now.
As a high performer, the whole adage of the balls or the weight on your shoulders, or I can do everything, I'll just do it. Bring your team involved, but you are always going to be tasked with the most of things to do. There is a lot of value for me in doing that role, right? I feel like if I wasn't that person, if I am that person, but if I made the decision to take a minor role, I wouldn't be as fulfilled. I feel like doing all the things that I am able to do and some provides me with a lot of fulfillment and happiness. First question is, can you resonate with that? Secondly, how have you changed the way you define or associate with the idea of happiness?
I definitely can resonate. I think coming back to that identity piece, it's almost this is a validation piece in there as well. Like I'm proving that I can take all the things, give me the responsibility because I'm good enough to do it. And there's that proving element that I think was certainly there in my earlier years in that high performance space. And it was fulfilling until the point where it was too much to handle. I think everybody has that limit, and it got to the point where it was sort of unsustainable and probably quite unrealistic in what I could actually take on. In terms of fulfillment and happiness, I was fulfilled back there again in that time up until a point. And then now I gain fulfillment and happiness from different things. From my work in that sphere still, it's happiness to me now is living my purpose daily, waking up and doing things that I love, that are in my capacity and skill set, and serving people that I want to serve. And living into that truest expression, authentic version of myself now. And I think back then there were parts of myself where I wasn't doing that. I was taking on a different sort of
But is
identity.
the version of yourself back then, no doubt, unequivocally different to the person that I'm talking to across the desk? But were you not at that stage? Like, is it only in retrospect that you can identify that you're living your purpose now versus back then, or was the Kellie back then living her purpose, and it was just became that it wasn't, that you weren't?
Yeah, that's a really good definition of that. I would agree. I was living my purpose. I was living my dream job. It was everything I was gunning for since I was 15. And, I thought I'd made it in that first job, and then, naivety of youth. And I absolutely was doing what I wanted to be doing, serving people I wanted to serve at that point. But I think the difference was that I just took that to the extreme.
For sure. And
that would be the difference.
And maybe at some point, because we don't reconcile with our direction or what we're doing on our day-to-day, daily or weekly. You're just doing it. You're on the train.
Yep.
Because you jumped on at the station and you're holding on for dear life. And then all of a sudden, at some point, you look up and you go, shit, this is not where I'm on the wrong train here. And that's when it comes across. So what was it? Can you remember, or do you recall, in your experience, what was that? When did it all start to unravel?
I was on that train. I'd say it was a high-speed train since the age of 15, so a good 15 years. That train was speeding fast and speeding up, and it derailed at the point of my own burnout. So taking that high-performing role to the extreme, and really hit that wall 100 miles an hour. It was
physical for you too, right?
It was, and that is the nature of burnout. It is mental, it is physical, and there is quite a large emotional component of it. It's quite all-encompassing. And that's what it was for me. I'd been in that state of persistent chronic stress for so long that I think my experience was probably quite extreme and not what everybody experiences, but just the nature of that environment and my own personality traits in that high performer identity in that. And that was the kryptonite. And it took me quite a long time actually to recover from that, my physical health, alongside mental and emotional health.
How long do you put to the recovery?
12 months acutely. I ended up resigning from that role. I took a year out of my career. I was so destroyed that I just needed space. And I needed time and reconsider what was next. And I would say to get back to full physical functioning, that was a trial and error process really of about 5 years, I would say, a good 5 years to really get back to that sustainability piece that we were talking about without going through these little micro cycles of pushing too far and overloading my system again and regressing. And that happened for quite a while until I sort of figured out the formula of how do I build this into a sustainable system. And so that would have took a good 5 years. And 10 years later, another 5 years on top of that, it's still daily. It's still a daily practice and process of staying on top of that.
Yeah, right. That just shows how incredibly detrimental that experience is to people and the lasting effects of it. So you work now with a lot of business and a lot of leaders in business. How's your experience changed the way you would work with them? What are you teaching those leaders now to avoid what you had to experience?
I come at my work now with a lot of compassion. Having been through that experience personally, I can really empathize with the mindset, the narrative, the thought patterns, and what's driving it. I've been in those shoes as the performer, and so I can understand it sort of from that mental element. I also, can understand it from that deeply personal element. And for me, it's raising awareness. So it's really, if I think to your question around how do we prevent people from going down that path, it's trying to talk about it more, raising the signs, the symptoms, the habits, the behaviors that can lead us down that path. So that is certainly an element. But sometimes there's also a self-awareness piece involved that the individual sort of needs to come to that realization themselves that the way they may be working or operating is perhaps not as sustainable as it could be if they look to that future horizon and what they want to achieve in their career, because you're there for a reason. If you're a leader, if you're a high performer, you've got a career plan and trajectory. So I think it's awareness raising.
Hey team, just popping in to say thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the episode, please take a second to like or follow the show and share it with a friend. It's the best way to help us grow and keep bringing you more great content. All right, let's get back into it.
I think you touched on it before, that the work ethic, or the situation that we find ourselves in high performance, whether it may not be sustainable or not, but it comes from, there is an identity piece. There is a proving almost to yourself. And so, and that then leads into opening the well of, or the Pandora's box of self-worth and self-love. And, and I feel like, I don't know what the world would look like if we all wholly loved ourselves as people, as our own self, or if our self-worth was very, very high, would we have high performers at all? Again, that's a sample size of one, but I feel like I take on everything that I take on to prove to myself that I'm worthy. And if I open that box, that's a challenging box to open. And so I don't open that box and I just take on more, because it fuels, it sort of keeps that at bay to go, you're good because you're doing all this. Whereas if I wasn't doing all that, then I'd have to navel gaze a little bit more and think. So do you find that there is resistance for the high performing leaders? Because whatever the concoction of internal narratives, of the dialogue, of their own experience, that is a delicate balance that is allowing, it's almost the conduit to allow the high performance to occur. You unravel that. I'm just sitting here thinking, I don't know whether I'm going to be that motivated if we do unravel and we do get to the source and all of the things. Am I that bothered to then work as hard as I work?
I love that line of inquiry, and I resonate completely. That was my internal driver and narrative of proving to myself that I am good enough. That's been a life theme of mine in self-limiting beliefs. Not that I knew it at the time. It's only on a lot of navel gazing afterwards in unpacking that and what actually got me to that space. And definitely the proving piece, proving to myself and everybody else that I was good enough, that I was worthy of these roles, that I was the one that could get that job. I was the one that could be worthy to be taken overseas, like to get a job overseas outside of this system, and that I could do all of these things. And that, I guess, unhealthy driver of fuel was not being good enough and gap filling really drove. I would say it was one of the contributors to me overdriving and overextending myself to that degree. Since then, I've obviously done a lot of work on myself in the ensuing 10 years in between, and a lot of it was coming face to face with that these limiting beliefs that are showing up, particularly now as I embark on building my own business. What are the drivers behind that? And definitely, they say having your own business is the personal development journey you never signed up for. And the road is littered with all of that. And now I can say, to your point, I am just as motivated as I was back then, without, and I won't say they're completely gone. These beliefs are on the journey, but it's working with them, it's being aware of them. And I would say I am motivated now in different ways. Instead of being self-driving and this gap filling internally of this void, it was a void that I was trying to fill. And now it's a contribution and a service of things that I'm passionate about. And I think that's the motivator and the driver for me to be as high performing now as I can to help other people.
Yeah, that's nice to hear and good to know. But I don't think it can't be just you and I that have that experience. It must be a fair driver for a lot of leaders and a lot of high performers. This balance of proving to yourself or to others. You talk about vulnerability in leadership as well. How do you balance transparency with the leader's own performance expectations in sort of high stakes environments? How do you deal with in terms of empathy or in terms of being vulnerable to the group when there is this somewhat standard expectation that you can handle everything?
It's a really fine line. As a leader, there are different responsibilities and expectations on you. And I think it's balancing that nature of enough transparency that people know you are human and you're also experiencing what they're experiencing to a degree. But then there has to be that limit, I think, where you are still the leader. But there are positive sides to that. So for me, it's also what can we role model in that space? So vulnerability might be just transparency in the way that we're looking after ourselves. Do we have to hide the fact that we're, leaving early to pick up our kids, or we're heading off to go to the gym at lunchtime, or taking care of ourselves in these types of ways? So I think vulnerability can maybe look a little bit different. Transparency maybe, and is more to the point. And like, how do we show our teams that it is okay to take care of ourselves and that we shouldn't be sacrificing ourselves in these roles, no matter our role. Leadership, yes, there is a lot on your shoulders, but I think coming back to that sustainability piece, your team are probably your successors as well. So what kind of leaders are you sort of grooming to come up behind you, and what are they going to put in place? So showing that leadership, to be a leader, you need to take care of yourself. I think we could actually do with a lot more of that. A lot of the cultures that I've seen, unfortunately, in that environment don't necessarily allow for that. And when everybody is wearing their masks, nobody really knows the true story and what's going on. And I think we're perpetuating a cycle of behavior that is leading to burnout and these unhealthy workplaces and, unhealthy, disengaged workforces.
Yeah, the engagement between the team and the leader or the leadership is really important. That relationship is really important. And it is, I think you're right. I think it is certainly a fine line. You need to have the vulnerability enough for them to connect with you on a human level. You aren't just this bulletproof person that they cannot relate to. Nothing worse when you hear, oh, you can handle anything. Nothing phases you, or things like that, because it's like, well, no, that's not true at all. And if you are having that, even if it's a throwaway line, if you have that view that I'm not doing my job properly as a empathetic leader or as a vulnerable leader, because you believe I'm a magician here or I'm a superhero, but it's not the case, because I struggle significantly. So I think that's a really important point, to be able to say, no, I'm just like you.
Well, otherwise we're setting up false expectations of what leadership is, and also that personal experience. Like if we think about that piece that your team is going to be the successors of the leader or the leadership level on the whole, then we've got to show that it is manageable, because I think there's a little bit of a theme coming through that when you're bulletproof or you're a magician or you're superwoman or Superman and nothing phases you, that I think can feel unattainable for people. You might just opt out. You untick that box for yourself, like, oh, I can't do that. I've got a family. I've got these commitments. I've got this, this, and this. I don't want to sacrifice myself like that. So as leaders, we're remembering that our teams are looking up to us, and what are we doing? How are we managing it? How are we doing it? And in their heads, they're thinking, do I want that? Do I want to be you in 5 years, 10 years? And I think if we're talking about, creating the next wave of leaders, let's create healthy leaders that have the right expectations and are role modeling the right things. So, yeah, that's it. Like, what expectations are we setting, and then what are we role modeling around that?
I find it very. Obviously, sport to business is very strongly connected, but I also feel like parenting to business is very strongly connected. And I was listening to this parenting podcast recently, and I can't remember. I think it was a fair thought leader as well, but for the life of me, I can't think about it. But they had this great analogy about, and it can be definitely related to business, is that if you're on a plane and there's ridiculous turbulence, right? Let's say an engine's lost and it drops or whatever, and the passengers are freaking out. And the passengers are obviously your team or the kids, let's say for this purpose is the team. And the pilot gets on the phone, on the microphone. And there are three relatively polarizing approaches to this. And it's like, what would you want your leader to be? And it was one, in hysterics, like reactive, in hysterics. I don't know what's going on. This is crazy. This has never happened to me before. Just like take care of yourself, basically, like complete disassociation. You don't want that. And then the other option would be complete, I guess, the Superman version of what we just discussed. Oh, this is fine. They're right about. All good. But they've just, the team are really struggling. The passengers are really struggling, and you're dismissive of that. You're seen, even though irrespective of how you're handling this, you're seen to be so far away from understanding what your team is actually going through. And that's not healthy either. And the third, obviously, is the desired outcome, to have empathy, to go, I know this is scary, but I have had, and I see you struggling. I am struggling as well with this, but I have years of experience. I'm a qualified pilot, and I'll right this ship, and I'll see you in the airport. I'll see you on the airport in 45 minutes. And so it that example is to be able to show that this is hard for the leader as well, and it's not easy. But as you said, the role of a leader is to lead, is to steer the ship, the plane, as the case is, to true north, and to get the team through this. And I think that there is such a delicate line that in every scenario, right? Every sort of spot fire, every problem on a daily basis is that whole psychological safety thing we talked about earlier. Like the way you show up and the way you deal with every single matter needs to be consistent, or really ought to be consistent, because as a team, as a human interaction, the worst thing you can do as a parent is being consistent with your words or actions. But as a leader as well, if you're erratic, they don't know who is going to show up to an issue, and when you run a business, issues happen every day almost. You need to be very consistent with that approach, and to be able to go, okay, that's a problem.
Absolutely. And I would liken that as well to add, another role to that. It's the role of a coach and mentor as well. So it's being that calm, sure voice of reason without invalidating their experience. So
the business leaders that use your services would be expecting the same from you, right? To be able to say, yeah, that's shit, or that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And I'm here to help.
And it's a realness. It's not a reactivity either. Like I've been there. I know how shit that is. I know how hard that is. I can really relate. And suddenly you're on the same page. You're on the same level. You're at that point, and you can really build your way out of it together. And I think that's the nature of like every single one of those roles.
Let's talk about quiet quitting.
Mm.
Do you see it as a lack of engagement, or as a reaction to like the environment being unsustainable?
It's a combination of both. That was certainly a really rife issue, particularly in the post-pandemic heat, and it's continued since. And in different forms, I think. And yeah, I would say it's probably a factor of both. It's the additional pressures that are being placed on organisations, on teams. In this world of work that we're currently in, things are shifting and changing so much. Let alone what's going on with what's already there in the internal culture of a company. And then if that's out of balance, then that can lead people to that disengagement point. And when they're disengaged, they're looking for another role. And yeah, that creates all kinds of challenges for your business.
As leaders, how do you create that environment where that disengagement doesn't occur, do you think? What's the utopia? Give me utopia.
I've thought about this in my head, the utopia, and the people would think I'm crazy, but I think it comes back to some of the elements that we've already discussed. Like if we want people to be engaged, happy, truly thriving, they need to have their health and well-being. So in that sense, how do we create workplaces where it's like the environment is like the soil for a thriving garden? What does that look like in your company? What are the support systems, the structures, the systems, processes, policies that enable people to come to work and do their best work?
Problem is though that we're not there when they wake up, and we're not there when they go to bed. Right. So how do we achieve this?
Yeah, and it's a two-way street. So it's the garden that people can come to, and that's the organisation's responsibility. But exactly that, outside the 9 to 5, then what happens? So then there is a piece, and I'm a strong believer of this. There's a personal responsibility piece that comes down to how are you taking care of yourself to show up and do your best work. Because absolutely, there are habits and behaviours that we engage in that definitely detract from our performance. And so we as individuals, there's the two-way street. So the organisation has a responsibility, and we as individuals have a responsibility as well. And if you're a true high performer, then you would, likely be open to engaging in that. How do I have the time and flexibility to take care of myself, to take care of my health and do what's necessary so that I feel energetic, revitalized, that I can come in and do my best work. And if I think about my own experience, there were definitely challenges in that organizational sphere, culture and leadership, that wasn't a thriving environment. But then on my own sense, I also neglected my health, 100%. Self-sacrificing, self-neglecting, and it was all that hard-driving focus externally on performance. And some of that was unconscious. It was just that, narrow-minded focus. But other parts of it were leaning into these coping strategy behaviors that are never good. And, I knew, I'm a health professional, I have a doctorate in the area. I knew that they were not good for me, but they were a way for me to survive, and I was making certain choices in that instance. So I guess that's an example, and perhaps a long way to say that it is a two-way street. And you asked for the utopia, so that's my utopia is how do we in organisations put people first? I think if I was to be maybe a little bit brutal, but people first over profit centric in big corporates. And then as individuals, let's place a focus on us and retake control of our own health, start making conscious decisions about what that looks like if we're true high performers and we have a career trajectory that we're on.
David Goggins talks about how this concept of work-life balance is a farce for wanting to achieve something significant. I take the view that we're a long time dead. We have one opportunity. The opportunity to be alive is so remote, and we've got this opportunity. And so that's certainly a high driver for me to go and achieve something incredible. But certainly from my experience, I would attest to Goggins in the sense that you can't achieve big things by having a work-life balance on the daily, right? So on a micro level, it is. I don't believe it is achieved. It is possible. Every day is just so perfectly mapped out in the utopia of however you want it to look, but that every day you rest your head on the pillow and go, I took care of myself, my family, my community, and the world every single day. There is going to be periods of time where it is unhealthily skewed one way or the other. And I guess to a certain degree, that's pretty common because we go on holidays, and holidays is skewed heavily on the rest, recovery, non-work, non-life, non-life responsibilities. That's maybe 2 weeks. Let's say you go on a vacation for 2 weeks. Everyone goes, "Oh, that's wonderful," right? But if you worked for 2 weeks straight, had 4 hours a night of sleep, ate Doritos to get through, a Red Bull, I don't know what you want to drink or eat, but people would turn off and go, "Oh shit, that's a lot." But I think, and whether it's 2 weeks holiday, 2 months holiday, 2 weeks work, 4 months work, or whatever it is, but I guess my point is that ideally on a macro level, we've got balance. Yeah, there is a season to be had. Starting this firm, there was a season to be had, and where you've got to really sacrifice a lot. And it sounds like for you too, Kel, like when you're overseas, you're like, this is hard. There is a lot to be sacrificed. The risk, as I see it, is that becomes the norm. There is no off. It just continues. It becomes the normal routine that you forever work 18-hour days eating Doritos and Red Bull, and then the house of cards falls over. So how, in your mind, on prefacing that, how would you advise, how would you mentor in your role now as in your business, if someone comes to you and says, this is a season where I have to really pull it out. It requires 18 hours a day. It just does. I can't. I've got the team's working hard, but I need to. It's unhealthy, I accept. But how do we make sure, objectively or at least expressly, know that this is a short-term season and doesn't become a habit of this is what life looks like until I burn?
And that's exactly it. It's coming in with proactivity and oversight. But I think that takes a level of perspective. Like we've got to zoom out and we've got to understand and know that that is what's actually happening. Whereas, in some cases, certainly in mine, that was just, flat strap 100% for 100% of the time. And there was no end date on that. There was no light at the end of the tunnel for me. And I think maybe some leaders can also, relate to that, particularly in the circumstances now. But I also agree. I don't think there's a thing as balance, particularly as high performers, as people who want to not be ordinary and achieve amazing things. And I still put myself in that bucket. But yeah, how do we do this and make it sustainable? And so for me, it's almost like performance planning, like we did with athletes, right? Like you've done as well. So what are the seasons? You know that in micro cycles or macro cycles that there are periods that are, doing the base miles, and then there's periods that are really amping up the intensity and it's competition season. So how do you approach your year like that? And I do this with my clients. Let's grab a calendar, map out the intense periods of your year, the phases of your year. It's almost like the season. So off-season, pre-season, competition season. What are they? Know what they are. And more importantly, know what the downtime is.
Yes.
So what I see is like, oh my gosh, there's white space. I've got nothing in there. Let's start filling it with stuff. And we're doing junk miles then, right? We're not allowing the deep rest and recovery because we need more than a week or two to really really recover from and offset like that high performance mode that we're in. So that's how I do it.
Do you see that rest and recovery piece necessary to be in Bali, as an example, and detach completely? Or is it more healthy to be in the work environment but shift down a gear to go, okay, this is
both?
Yeah,
it's both. It's the microcycles and what we're doing on the daily and the weekly, maybe the monthly. So what can you do while you're still, on the run? Like, what are those micro things? And it doesn't have to be a lot. And when you get the right strategies around proactive recovery, even things like making sure your sleep is on point, and that might not be, the perfect 8 or 9 hours, but there are so many other elements of that we can tweak. There are so many recovery aspects that we can tweak, all of these levers that we can pull to give you those micro moments of recovery. You can do recovery within your day in 30 seconds to a minute, like if we're really getting down to those micros. And then it's broadening out to the macros. So then what are you doing maybe quarterly on aligning with school holidays or so? And, you go away for 2 weeks with your family and you have that time. You can switch off, phones off, laptops off, leave them at home, go somewhere and immerse in other types of rest and recovery, deeply restorative. That is social, it's emotional, and you're giving yourself that sensory rest. And I bet you come back better on the other side of that. But it takes courage to do that. And when we have the confidence that we've got that plan and this is part of my plan, and if I enact this is going to help me be a high performer. And that's how we keep that consistency long term.
And that's where you need to the motivation to elicit this change or this plan is that I want to be able to be a high performer forever and not until I burn out.
I don't want to retire.
Yeah, right. And so you map out the year, and I guess the benefit of that is that you get to a particular month where you are like, oh, that's my off season. That's my full rest. And if work is plowing through that, if you're plowing through the same level of peak performance, high performance, or the competition phase, as we discussed, the intensity through that phase, then it becomes, because you've taken the overarching, the higher perspective look of your year, then that can be a trigger or a flag to go, hang on, this is not what we had planned. Is that acceptable? Because it could be a different, the environment changes, circumstances changes, but it's like, at least it comes from a place of like, well, we need to then reposition that. Because whereas if you hadn't got that plan, you're just plowing through. You're just doing performance peak phase for months on end, and that's a real issue.
It is, and I think that's a really important piece. And I've noticed this myself over the past 6 to 12 months with clients, but also with my own planning. Practicing what I preach. But it's almost breaking it down into 6-monthly cycles now. Too much changes in 12 months almost. And so if that's the case, that's fine. Do a mid-year checkpoint or whatever your cycle is that you work from in your industry. Make sure that you're checking in. If things shift and change, fine, but replan it. Don't just knock it off the table completely and bulldoze through it. And that's what we do, I think, all too often in that state. And when we bring that back to the physiology of what's actually happening, it's not just a nice to have to take this time and, I'm sticking to my plan and being a good person. It's really about, okay, so what's happening to the physiology? And it's that build up, that wear and tear of chronic stress. And stress in terms of like load and pressure and what it takes to perform at that level from a physicality perspective, we underestimate because we live from our head. And we don't necessarily always listen to what our body is telling us. And so that load that builds up, allostatic load of that chronic stress, like we almost need to protect ourselves from ourselves and have those fail safes in where we've got this time that's actually, okay, we need to not do nothing but downshift those gears. And we're just doing maintenance work now. We're not doing the extra hours. We're not working the 18-hour days. We're not taking the laptop home on the weekend. We're downshifting. We're pulling back maybe to a 9 to 5, and that's fine for this phase. And we're taking that bit of extra time to get more sleep, to get on top of our exercise, to eat healthier, to engage in some more recovery, so that when we're back in performance mode, we've got the energy, we've got the capacity to be able to do that and to perform the way that we want to perform. Right, because we all have expectations of ourselves. And so it's really how do we flex? And this is something I've had to learn for myself. So I'm certainly not preaching here. It's a daily, a weekly thing that I have to, keep on top of and really look at for myself. So if I want to run my business and do all the things I want to do, it's how do we flex between those times of peak and rest cycles?
Kel, this is deeply refreshing, and I thank you so much for your time, because this is why I do the podcast. It becomes selfish because it's like I just do it for myself and everyone gets to listen. But I really appreciate you coming and sharing your take on it, because it is refreshing. Something that I think we all need to implement. Have that, just the space to look at the overall plan so that we don't fall in a heap. And so it can be a long term of high performing, not just a short term.
I think it's the time for it now as well. I think what we're seeing is that we need a new way of working. Particularly, my niche is working with women leaders in particular, and we don't have to look too far to see that this old way of operating is not really serving many people. So what I'm really passionate about now and driven is this piece, is how do we raise awareness? How do we help people to redefine the way that we're working and live more by design rather than this
Reacting.
Default mode, reaction and default mode that we've been living in. So I really think that, what got us here is not going to get us there.
Yeah.
We're really facing a lot of change. And for me, this is prime opportunity. So while we're reimagining all of these aspects of work, let's reimagine what it's like for people as well.
All right, before you go, final fast 5 questions. What does success mean to you?
Success now is an internal metric for me. It's waking up every day, doing work I love, with people I love, living into that purpose, and that internal living authentically to me, but living into my potential still. And that's the high performance piece. If I can still be reaching my limits and living into that potential, then that is success for me.
What does happiness mean?
An undercurrent, like a low level undercurrent of positive energy in my life that no matter, and this is internal as well, and so no matter what's going on externally, I still have that happiness within me and those moments of joy, the higher version of that.
What does your morning routine ordinarily look like?
I'm an early exerciser, remnants of triathlon days. So first thing I do, I get up, I exercise, usually running in the morning, then a coffee, a meditation, duration dependent, and then, into breakfast and getting ready for the day.
Love that. A piece of advice you'd give to your younger self that you could put on a billboard for the world to see?
Oh, wow. Burnout is not the price of success.
Love that. Might be the
If
title.
only I had seen that billboard, but you know what? I don't know if I would have paid
read it
attention.
anyway. And then finally, a guest that you, someone that you know that you think would be a great person to have on the show.
I think Kellie Tomney would be an amazing person to have on the show. So she is a work futurist, human futurist, and she's working with leaders and organisations on, future fit, becoming future fit for this new world of work and all of the change that's coming. So be on the front foot. So she's working with individuals, she's working with organisations as a coach, and a keynote speaker is a lot of her work. So I think that'd be an excellent, maybe follow on. She'll take this and run with
Sounds
it.
perfect. I can't thank you enough, Kel. I really appreciate your time coming up to the coast, and if the listeners got 10% of what I just got, I'll be stoked because that was brilliant. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're in Switzerland leading an Olympic team, turn to the person next to you and tell them all about the show. It really means a lot. A huge thank you to Dr. Kellie for joining us and sharing her insights on what high performance truly looks like. If her message resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who might need to hear it. Every share helps us grow and continues these important conversations. Until next time, peace.